The morning sky was still gray with sleep, the river swollen with last night's storm, its surface stirred by wind and memory. Mist lifted like the breath of ghosts, soft against the pale skin of a woman dragged barefoot through the reeds. Her name was Catherine. 25. A second wife. A girl who had once read psalms by candlelight but now had bruises hidden under every hem. She did not scream. She did not resist. Her silence was not surrender, but the kind born after long winters inside a house where no one opened the windows. Agnes walked behind her, holding her by the wrist the way a midwife might guide a girl in labor, gently, but with no intention of letting go. Agnes was 25 too, but proud in a way Catherine had long forgotten how to be. A full-hipped woman with hair pinned like iron to her skull and eyes that glinted with righteousness. The other wife. The favored one. The one who cooked Marshall's meat and laughed at his cruel jokes when the town elders passed by. "You were always too soft," Agnes hissed. Her fingers bit tighter into Catherine's skin. "Soft like rotten fruit." "He said you had no spine." He was right. Catherine stumbled, the hem of her dress soaked dark from the dew, her feet cut by stones half buried in the mud. The birds did not sing. The world felt as though it were waiting. The river appeared through the mist like something ancient, wide, brown, unknowable. It smelled of silt and time. Catherine's heart beat once, then again, slow as hooves in snow. Her eyes did not weep. They hadn't in weeks. Behind them, no one followed. Marshall was still sleeping off the whiskey he drank after the last lashing. No law would be broken today. No one would call this murder. "It's a cleansing," Agnes had whispered to the mirror that morning. "A casting out." They reached the edge, where the earth crumbled into water. Agnes let go just long enough to push back her sleeves. "Don't fight me," she said. "The Lord loves the quiet-hearted." But Catherine did not move. And then, the sound of reins and hoofbeats, soft and unexpected, like the creak of an old door opening. A horse stood just off the trail, steam rising from its flanks. Upon it sat a man whose eyes seemed carved from river stone. Long black hair braided with care, his face unreadable but not cruel. A rifle hung at his back, untouched. His name would not be known yet. Only the truth that when he saw Catherine, he dismounted not like a stranger, but like someone called. The Comanche did not speak for a moment. Agnes stepped forward, drawing herself up like a church bell. "She's my sister wife. She sinned. This is our matter." Still, no words. Only the wind between them. Catherine's knees trembled. Her lips cracked from sun and fear. And then the man said, low and without heat, "She's not yours to drown." Agnes scoffed. "She's not yours either." He stepped closer. The horse remained still. "No," he said, "but I don't have to own a thing to know it should be left alive." Agnes laughed. Not the kind that held humor, but the sharp-edged cackle of a woman unraveling. "You want to save her? What'll you do? Marry her?" She turned to Catherine. "You hear that? Another man to chain you up. You think he's different?" Catherine stared at the river. She imagined stepping forward, not to die, but to disappear. But she didn't. She looked at the Comanche man. He was watching her, not with pity, but with recognition. As if he'd seen other broken things held together with quiet. He extended a hand. Catherine didn't take it. She stepped past it. She walked to the horse on her own 2 feet. Blood trailed behind her, small and red on the riverbank. Agnes screamed something. A curse. A prayer. A threat. It didn't matter. The man led the horse gently forward. Catherine climbed into the saddle like she'd never done it before. Her hands shook. Her face was still wet, not from tears, but from the river air. He didn't say anything more. He only turned the horse west, toward the sunrise. She did not look back. The ride was slow, deliberate. Her hands clutched the saddle horn. She didn't ask where they were going. It didn't matter. He rode beside her now, not ahead. She glanced sideways once. He didn't speak. But she noticed the way he scanned the trees. How his hand hovered near the reins, ready for storms. The sun broke through in gold veins. Birds returned to the sky. Somewhere behind them, the town began to stir, breakfasts lit, gossip woken, judgment resuming. At a ridge above the valley, they stopped. The Comanche dismounted and offered her a drink from a worn leather pouch. She drank without thinking. Then she spoke, the first time since the river. "You don't know me." He said nothing. She tried again. "You should have let her." Still nothing. She looked at him then. Not expecting softness, but some answer. And he said, simply, "I don't rescue people. I only stop things that shouldn't happen." She blinked. The wind moved through the grass like breath. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, her shoulders relaxed. He gestured to the trail. "My land's not far." She asked, "Why would you take me there?" He looked at her. No smile. Just truth. "Because I have no wife. And no reason to hate you." She almost laughed. It came out like a cough. She nodded once. They rode on. And behind them, the river kept moving, carrying nothing but the mud and the sins it didn't swallow that morning. The trail to his land was narrow, flanked by cottonwoods and silence. Catherine rode without asking his name, and he didn't offer it. She didn't speak again after that single question by the ridge, and he didn't press her to. The quiet between them wasn't strained, it was the kind of silence that happens when both people carry too many words they've never been allowed to say aloud. By mid-morning, the land opened like a breath let out. A small homestead appeared in a hollow where the river bent. Fencing half mended. A barn the color of old rust. The house was plain but clean, timbers chinked with clay, smoke curling from the chimney. Horses grazed in a sunlit paddock, their coats brushed and gleaming. It wasn't much. But it was still standing. And something about that mattered. He dismounted and tied the reins to a fence post. Catherine stayed seated, unsure if the ride was over or just paused. When he looked up at her, he didn't gesture, didn't speak, just waited. She slid down, legs trembling with fatigue she didn't admit. Her palms burned from the saddle horn, her skirt stiff with dried river mud. She touched the barn door like a threshold and stepped inside. The air was warm with hay and the sweet musk of horses. Dust floated like gold in sunbeams that spilled through warped slats. Everything smelled of cedar and old sweat and leather, honest smells. Safe ones. "This is yours," he said. "You can sleep here." She blinked, startled he spoke at all. "Not the house?" "I sleep there." She nodded. The barn was more than enough. It didn't have walls that echoed with yelling. It didn't have a door that locked from the outside. He brought a blanket and a jug of water. A crust of bread. A carved wooden bowl with thick venison stew. She didn't ask for it. He didn't ask if she'd eaten. She sat on the hay, cradling the food like something sacred. He lingered by the door but didn't come in. Outside, the wind stirred the chimes of an old harness left hanging. Somewhere, a hawk cried once and was gone. That night, she lay curled beneath the blanket on a pile of hay, her shawl pulled over her shoulder like armor. She did not cry. Her eyes were open, watching the slats where moonlight poured through like silver threads. Each gust of wind moved the barn just slightly, as if it breathed with her. She closed her eyes once the horses stopped shifting. She woke before dawn. The blanket had fallen. Her fingers were cold. But her body ached less than usual. No new bruises. No barked orders. Just morning. Outside, he was already feeding the horses. He nodded when she emerged. She didn't return the gesture. She watched him work. His movements were clean, unhurried, respectful. She began brushing one of the maras without asking. He didn't stop her. By afternoon, she'd cleaned out the stalls. swept the floor, repaired a broken latch. He noticed, but didn't praise. That night, another bowl of stew. This time, a small apple left beside it. She didn't touch it right away. It had been a long time since she'd been given anything sweet. On the third morning, she spoke. "You have no children." He shook his head. "Never married?" "No." She waited for more. Nothing came. "You ever want to?" He looked at her, long and still, and said only, "Didn't see the point in asking someone to live in a world like this." She folded her arms. "You think it's better, being alone?" "I thought it was. Until I saw someone who wasn't meant to be alone." She didn't answer. But that night, she left the barn door open so the lamplight from the porch could fall across her bed of hay. Not because she needed the light, but because it meant someone was awake nearby. Days passed. She began humming when she fed the horses. Sometimes old church songs. Sometimes nothing at all. He brought a comb one evening and left it by the water bucket. She used it the next morning without comment. In town, the gossip had bloomed like a sickness. Agnes wept to the preacher. Claimed Catherine had been seduced, bewitched. The sheriff listened, spit tobacco, and shrugged. If she wanted to leave, she left. Comanche didn't steal her. "She's broken," Agnes insisted. "He'll see that." But Elias didn't seem to care if she was broken. He watched her like a man tracking weather. He never touched her. Never raised his voice. But he noticed when her hands shook. When she flinched at thunder. When she skipped her supper and walked for hours in circles just outside the fence line, unsure if she should stay. One morning, she found a coat folded on the barn rail. It was hers. Or at least, now it was. It fit snug at the shoulders, had soft lining and deep pockets. No note. No gesture. Just the coat, warm with meaning. That evening, she knocked on the house door. He opened it like it wasn't a surprise. "I'd like to sit on the porch," she said. He nodded. Moved aside so she could pass. They sat for a long time without speaking. The lantern lit their faces. Crickets chirped like old gossip. Coyotes yipped far off. She looked at him then, her face half in shadow. "You think people can stop being afraid?" He thought about it. "I think some fears stay. But they get smaller. You make them small by choosing something else each day." "Like?" He didn't look away. "Like brushing a horse. Or sitting on a porch with someone you're not afraid of." She smiled then, the smallest curve of her lips. Not joy. But maybe relief. He stood. "Good night, Catherine." She stood too. "Good night, Elias." Her voice saying his name was the most intimate thing exchanged between them yet. She returned to the barn. She slept with the door slightly open, so the wind could come in. And for the first time in years, she dreamt of nothing at all. Just warmth, and the sound of someone out there hammering a new fence post, whistling low, believing in morning. The days stretched into something gentler than either of them had expected. Catherine kept to the barn, but she no longer flinched when he passed by. She no longer walked in tight circles around the property line, testing for invisible boundaries. She swept the porch in the mornings. Repaired a loose saddle strap one afternoon. Her fingers were still swollen from old injuries, but they worked with quiet skill. Elias watched her from the corner of his eye, never pressing, never asking, but something inside him counted the hours differently now. She didn't know the shape of his past, only that he moved like a man who carried it carefully. He'd lived alone for years, not in bitterness, but in stillness. The world had taught him that silence lasted longer than promises. That peace didn't come from having someone, but from not being taken. He'd seen too many lives torn by forced unions, crooked laws, and sharp mouths. So he'd built fences, tamed horses, and asked nothing of anyone. Until Catherine stood in his barn, barefoot and raw, humming to his mare like the song was keeping her together. Something shifted then. Not loudly. Not with any great decision. Just shifted. She never asked about his people. He never asked about her pain. But they moved around each other like two birds learning to share a tree after a storm. One afternoon, she was shelling beans on the porch, sleeves rolled up, braid swinging low. He sat beside her, mending a bit of leather. She asked, "Do you miss it?" He looked at her. "What?" "Solitude. Your quiet life." He considered. "I still have quiet." She nodded. "But now there's me in it." He didn't smile, but his voice was soft when he said, "You don't take up much room." She raised her brow. "Is that a kindness?" "It's the truth." Her fingers slowed. "I've been told before that I disappear easy." "You don't disappear," he said. "You just don't shout." The wind picked up, rattling the chimes. She looked down at her hands, then at the dirt path leading to the main road. "The town thinks we're improper," she said. He didn't respond. "They say I've cursed this land." He adjusted the bit of leather. "This land's seen worse curses." She waited, then said, "You never asked me to stay." "I didn't think I needed to." "What if I wanted you to?" His hands stilled. He met her eyes. "Do you?" She exhaled slowly, not like someone uncertain, but like someone letting go of weight. "Yes. But not because I'm broken." "I know." They didn't say more. That was enough. The next morning, she came out of the barn with her hair braided in 2 ropes instead of 1. A clean dress. Boots instead of bare feet. She asked if he needed help moving lumber, and he handed her a pair of gloves without a word. They worked side by side until their shirts clung with sweat. When they broke for water, he poured it into her hands first. She asked, "Did you ever love anyone before?" He wiped his brow. "I buried someone." "A wife?" "A sister." She nodded. Waited. "She was hung for something she didn't do. I was away at the time. By the time I rode back, they'd already buried her under a name that wasn't hers." Catherine's breath caught, but she said nothing. "I don't think about marriage much," he continued. "Because the world don't treat women kindly, and it don't treat men who protect them much better." She stared into the wind. "You think I need protecting?" "No," he said. "I think you deserve someone who doesn't flinch when you speak." She blinked hard. Her hands clenched in her lap. "I thought maybe I'd live in that barn forever. Be half ghost, half help." "Do you want to?" She shook her head once, sharp and clear. He stood. Walked to the fence. Rested his hands on it like a man considering distance. "If I were to ask, not because I need someone to cook or clean or lie beside me, but just to say I'd keep making room for your voice, would that be enough of a reason?" She stepped up beside him, dirt still on her palms, the sun high behind her. "It would be the only reason I'd say yes." His fingers brushed hers, accidental or not, she didn't know. But she didn't move away. That night, they didn't speak over supper. But she stayed longer at the porch steps. When he rose to go inside, she followed. He paused at the door. "You sure?" he asked. She touched his arm, light as breath. "You never asked for a wife," she said. "But maybe I was never meant to be one. Maybe I was just meant to stay where I'm seen." He let her pass through first. The lamp glowed low inside. The table was plain, wood-nicked and scarred. But she set the plates, and he lit the second candle. Outside, a wind came in from the east, cold and full of change. And for the first time in either of their lives, the silence in the house did not feel like loneliness. It felt like soil ready for something to grow. The wind carried word faster than any writer ever could. By the time Elias carved a ring from an antler and Catherine said yes with the smallest of nods, the town already knew. They whispered it behind curtained windows, spat it out over church pews. "The Comanche's marrying that Crowell woman. He stole her, now he's dressing her in white?" Shame to see a man lower himself like that. But they never said it in front of Elias. And they never said it where Catherine could hear. Still, she knew. Some kinds of judgment hang in the air like ash after a fire, thick and clinging. He didn't ask her what kind of wedding she wanted. She didn't need to be asked. She said it with her hands when she washed out the old basin, said it with her silence when she brushed her hair smooth in the barn. She wanted something honest. Nothing grand. Nothing taken. The dress wasn't new. Elias found the fabric at the edge of town, traded 2 cured hides for it. Soft cotton, cream-colored with a hint of wildflower print that only showed in full sun. He stitched it himself, slow and awkward, but careful. When he gave it to her, she held it like it might vanish. "No one ever made me something that fit," she whispered. He only said, "Then wear it like it's always been yours." They didn't send invitations. No preacher was summoned. But word still spread, because gossip doesn't wait for an invite. By mid-morning, people began to gather in 2s and 3s near the river bend, the same place where Agnes once tried to push her in. Catherine stood at the edge of the barn in that white dress, feet bare by choice this time, braid down her back like a line drawn in peace. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from disbelief. She was still here. Still standing. And somehow, loved. Lena, the little girl from town who once saw the river scene, held a handful of fresh-picked daisies. She'd shown up without being asked. Catherine smiled when she saw her, then knelt and took the flowers as if they were holy. Elias waited by the water, boots dusted clean, dark hair tied neat, his rifle left behind. He didn't look nervous. He looked certain. Like a man who had learned not to expect anything from the world, but still knew how to be grateful when it offered something back. Agnes appeared just as the sun crested. She rode in hard, dusty, eyes sharp with venom wrapped in virtue. Dressed in black. Grieving something only she could name. "This isn't a marriage," she said to anyone who'd listen. "It's a sickness." He took her. Worked her. But the sheriff didn't move. Mrs. Greeley only muttered, "Ain't no crime to save a woman from hell." Catherine didn't even turn to look at Agnes. She walked toward Elias like the voices weren't real. Like she'd already left them behind. The river glinted beside her. The dress caught the light. The daisies shook gently in her grip. Elias reached out, not to take her hand, but to offer her a piece of the antler ring. She slid it on herself. He didn't kiss her. They didn't speak vows. The wind rustled the cottonwood branches, and that was enough. Agnes hissed something about shame. About sin. But her voice cracked, thin and brittle. Catherine finally turned to her, not angry, just steady. "You can't unmake peace, Agnes. You can only walk away from it." Agnes didn't respond. She turned and rode off, dust in her wake. Lena threw her last flower into the river. It floated without sinking. Later that night, the townsfolk returned home to their shutters and stories. Some would call it a scandal. Others, a miracle. But no one could deny what they saw, a woman who had once been dragged like garbage, now walking like a queen. Catherine sat on the porch beside Elias, legs tucked under her, head resting on his shoulder. The lamplight made her dress look gold. "You think it'll always be like this?" she asked softly. "No," he said. "But I think we'll face whatever it becomes. Together." She didn't answer. Just reached for his hand. The barn glowed faint behind them. The wind had settled. And the river, too, moved quietly, as if it had finally been told a story worth listening to. The fire came in the night, just after the crickets had gone quiet and the moon hung swollen and low. It began with the scent oil, sharp and unnatural, creeping beneath the door like a warning. Then came the crack of timber, the sound of flames catching dry hay, the terrified scream of a mare in the barn. Catherine sat bolt upright before Elias reached the door. She was barefoot, hair loose, already moving. He called her name once, but she didn't pause. She'd known this day would come. The town could ignore a Comanche marriage. It could turn its cheek to a woman redeemed. But some people couldn't. Some hatred grew jealous when it had no more power. By the time Elias got outside, she was already in the barn. "Catherine," he shouted, but the flames swallowed the sound. The roof had not yet collapsed, but smoke poured like breath from the rafters, thick and black. Inside, she found the colt first trapped by a fallen beam, squealing and kicking. The fire painted the world red. Her lungs burned, her shawl caught flame as she tugged the colt's rope loose. Her eyes stung, but she didn't blink. She wrapped the colt's face, whispered to it like a hymn, and led it stumbling toward the door. Elias saw her then, through the blaze, barefoot, streaked in soot, leading the foal like some figure out of a fever dream. He didn't wait. He ran into the flames, met her halfway, scooped the colt in one arm, her in the other, and dragged them into the night air. She collapsed on the dirt, coughing hard, her chest heaving. He doused the smoldering edge of her skirt with his hands. "Are you burned?" he asked, voice low, eyes frantic. "No," she whispered. "Not this time." The barn groaned behind them, then fell inward in a shower of sparks. Horses whinnied from the far paddock, safe but afraid. The air stank of ash and revenge. From the hilltop came a flicker of movement, someone retreating fast, hunched and cloaked. Elias stood, rifle raised, but didn't fire. "Not yet." "Agnes," Catherine said softly. He looked down at her. "You're sure?" She nodded once. "She always told me I was meant for burning." Neighbors came running with buckets. One man cursed under his breath when he saw Catherine alive. But no one dared speak openly. The sheriff arrived last, breathing heavy, saw the burnt barn, the soot-blackened dress, the scorched fence post. Elias spoke first. "Someone lit it." The horses were locked in. The sheriff looked between them, at Catherine's blistered palms and red eyes. Then he nodded. "I'll ask questions," he said. "But don't expect answers. Some fires come from places no one'll admit to." Elias didn't reply. He only helped Catherine up, cradling her gently as if she might still break. The next morning, the wind carried ash across the fields. The barn was gone. The colt, though shaken, walked steady by noon. Catherine spent hours brushing it, not speaking. Her skin was blistered in places, but she didn't wince. She fed the animal slowly, whispered its name like a promise. The townspeople whispered too, this time in quieter tones. A few women brought bandages. One left a jar of honey for the burns. No apologies. No justice. But sometimes silence shifts. Agnes never returned. Her cabin stood cold and empty a week later. The preacher said she'd gone east to stay with kin. No one asked why. One evening, Catherine walked back to the river. The same bend where the world once tried to swallow her. She stepped into the water slowly, fully clothed, the hem of her white dress dragging like memory. Elias followed, but didn't interrupt. She sank to her knees in the cold, dark current, let the water run over her arms, her face, her hair. When she turned to look at him, she was soaked and shining in the moonlight. "I'm not haunted," she said. "Not anymore." He stood barefoot on the shore, watching. "No," he said. "You're something else now. I think I finally know what peace feels like." He stepped forward, knee-deep, took her hand. "And if it tries to leave?" She smiled softly. Then we reminded what it found here. Back at the house, she hung her wet dress by the porch. The wind picked up, rattling the eaves. A storm would come soon. They always did. But she had rebuilt before. She would rebuild again. She leaned against Elias beneath the awning, warm despite the chill. "You never told me what made you stay that day," she said. "I saw someone trying to disappear," he answered. "And I didn't want to live in a world that let that happen." Her eyes closed, head resting on his shoulder. "I didn't disappear," she murmured. "No," he whispered, wrapping his arm around her. "You became." The storm rolled in gentle, slow. And the river hummed softly in the dark, like it was finally at rest. Some stories in the West are written in fire, others in blood. But this one was written in water and wind, in silence that turned into a voice. Catherine was never rescued. She was simply allowed to rise. And sometimes, that's the holiest kind of love.